Wake up, everybody, no more sleeping in bed.
Morning, Detroit. Thank you for joining me, Margaret Trimer-Hartley, for my show, Journey to Jobs. This is the inaugural show here on 910 AM Superstation. Every Sunday from 11 to 1, we will be talking about workforce development, career awareness, entrepreneurship, and all the things that can connect our young people who need opportunities with the many opportunities that exist here in our city and our region. In the last half hour, we had a pretty phenomenal discussion with Lisa Katz with the William Davidson Foundation. And she, as she was walking out, said there were 3 additional points that she really wanted to drive home to our listeners today. And one is the importance of mentors. And as I can attest, my own mentor called up this morning and offered some suggestions for us, gave Adonis some good questions and thoughts about the work he is doing. And as we talked with Vaughn, there's more kids right now than we have adults to help and support them. And I think it's so important to remind educators and clergy and parents that our kids need to hook up with caring adults. And oftentimes they need those caring adults to be outside the household as much as they need them to be inside the household. My daughter is 14, and I'll tell you, the other people's parents and other adults in her life have so much more credibility than I do right now. I want them echoing great messages and reinforcing the things my daughter ought to be doing. Lisa also reminded us that passion and finding that passion among our young people and supporting it and stoking it is so critical. I know when I was running schools, one of the first things we tried to do was charge up our students' batteries by tapping into that passion. And Adonis, you spoke to the fact that you love doing lawns. You love to see the before and after difference and know that that came about because of your efforts. So reinforcing the importance of passion, not dismissing it, not shutting it down in our kids, and also the fact that a couple of callers have offered you work. It reminds us that local sourcing is really important. Big box, big chains, they're all great. They have their place. But to buy local and to care local is really what is also part of building a community. So, again, thank Lisa Katz for joining us for that conversation. Now we're going to turn to another terrific resource in our city, someone who works tirelessly on behalf of really the economy and building community, and that is Jeff Donofrio, who is the Director of Workforce Development for the City of Detroit, a post you took 2 years ago in 2015. I think you and I were coming on to our current jobs at about the same time, and as I recall, and actually I dug up a quote because it was powerful to me when you first joined the mayor's staff, it's powerful to me today. At that time you said, what scares me is losing a generation here. You said we have to make sure we provide those opportunities to the people who live here so that they can be part of success, this success. They can become part of this renaissance. How are we doing in that endeavor, Mr. Donofrio?
Well, Margaret, thank you for having me on, and congratulations on the inaugural first show.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing about and participating in the future here, too.
Well, you will be. Called upon. Be careful what you ask for.
Exactly. Well, we'll diversify. We'll make sure that we get you a whole bunch of folks from the city of Detroit who are working on some really great projects. I can tell you, so really it was 2 years ago this month that Mayor asked me to come back from Washington, D.C., take a leave of absence from Ford Motor Company to try to help reimagine workforce development in the city and try to figure out what could we do that would really make an impact on not just individuals, but the city as a whole. And of course, we look at Detroit and there are challenges, right? There are huge challenges when we look at especially employment. Out of the 50 largest communities in the country, Detroit is 50 out of 50 in terms of residential employment. As of 2015, that was only about 50% of our population. You compare that to places like Cleveland, which is at 55%. You compare that to places like Baltimore or Philadelphia, which are closer to the 60% range. You compare that to Atlanta, which has a really hot economy, which is in the 70% range, and we have a long way to go. I think that's what we, when I came back in, I was really brought in to be executive director of the Mayor's Workforce Development Board, which is a board that's created by federal government, federal law, that helps direct where the funding that we get from all levels of government is going to be spent in workforce development, but also helps set a strategy and a policy for how we can start moving the needle on those types of numbers like employment. And really, when we looked at those statistics, we said, okay, we have to set an aspirational goal, right? We have to say this is what we want to reach towards, and that's really 100,000 more Detroiters at work in good-paying jobs. But in the next 5 years, what can we do that strategically is going to help us move a whole bunch of different organizations and shift their way of thinking, shift the leverage points that we have in the community to make some real progress. And we said that was going to be 40,000 more Detroiters employed. So that would get us into the middle tier pack. That would get us into the 60% range if we were able to get 40,000 more Detroiters a job. So, over the last 4 years, what you've seen is about 18,000 more Detroiters become employed. Over the last 2 years, you've seen 10,000. So clearly we're accelerating. We're seeing, yeah, exactly. More Detroiters every year are getting jobs than the previous year. But there's still a lot of challenges that are standing in the way. So when we look at the scope of what we're trying to do, and I think there are obviously population approaches. So we can look at specific segments of our population like youth. We can look at returning citizens. We can look at those individuals who are in school right now, or those individuals who've been long-term unemployed, and we can tailor programs that really try to help meet people where they are and remove the barriers that they have, because it's not always about, when we talk about the skills gap and we talk about all the jobs that are out there that are going unfilled and all the individuals out there who are looking for a job, it's not always about the skills. It's about those work readiness barriers that we see in the community, like transportation, like childcare, like housing. One of the things that I've been working on over the last few months has been something called driver's responsibility fees, which I'm sure many of your listeners are pretty familiar with. Across the state of Michigan, you have about 340,000 individuals that have an outstanding driver's responsibility debt. This is a law that was created in 2003. So if you get a ticket, you have to driving ticket, for instance, you pay a fee associated with that ticket. But the state also asks you to pay an additional fee that could be as much as $1,000. And for folks who are, struggling to make ends meet, who are in the middle class, who are, close to poverty, in poverty, that's a really high burden to have to
Tickets
meet.
are hard for me.
Tickets are
okay,
hard,
and I'm
yeah.
making an okay living.
That's
so
right.
I can only imagine the hurdle that they then represent.
That's right. And, the what's even worse, of course, is that if you don't pay your fee, your driver's license is suspended.
All of that.
So when you look at the city of Detroit, you look at the high cost of insurance, for instance. If you get a ticket for driving around without insurance, now you can't pay that ticket and you can't pay the driver's responsibility fee associated with that ticket because you can't afford insurance in the first place. Now you're dug into this hole that you're just not going to get out of, and now you lose your license, right? And so you are now shut off from a whole host of employment opportunities, whole host of training opportunities. And so we've got to find a way to get people out of that. And the House and the Senate right now are moving some bill packages that we've worked on with them to really try to alleviate that and remove that as a barrier. One in particular that we worked with Senator Horn from Saginaw on building as a piece of legislation takes a person who's going through one of our workforce development programs, and then for every 10 hours of workforce development training that they do, as long as they complete the program, we can wipe out a fee. And so it's helping people earn their way back into a productive place in society. What we really tried to make sure, because we found this out when we were working through our prison programs. We have two prisons that we work in right now. We're training folks before they re-enter into the community. It's the Detroit Reentry Facility on Ryan Road, and then the Macomb Correctional Facility. And we saw that 75% of the individuals who we were working with, training in prisons and then helping to connect to a job once they were released, actually had a driver's responsibility fee. Average fee is about, across the city of Detroit, is about $1,600, and you have 76,000 Detroiters who have a fee. So that's 18% of our adult population. How are we expected to really make huge progress on unemployment, on really connecting people to good family-sustaining wages and jobs if we have 18% of our population who can't get a license?
Right. But you run into a culture problem there, too, because on the one hand, we want to remove barriers, right?
Yeah.
We want to make possibilities real, and yet you also want people to be accountable. You want people to understand, you screw up, there's a penalty to be paid.
Yeah.
So what's the balance, and how do we change a culture that basically says, you kick me when I'm down?
Right. Well, I think with driver's responsibility fees, this is a double fee, right? This is not, so you get a fee associated with the ticket. That's associated with a mistake you may have made driving, or the fact that you are unable to pay for insurance. And so that's separate from this driver responsibility fee. So this fee has nothing to do with safety. It has nothing to do with, really a mistake you've made, other than it's a way for the state, to raise revenue. And so we have some really great bipartisan lawmakers up in Lansing who are trying to address this problem right now. I think in the next, the bill package passed out of the Senate this last week. It's likely going to go up before the House this next week or the week following. So I think you'll see something go to the governor hopefully before the end of the year. But it's really critical that that bill package, because things can change along the way, is going to give people the opportunity, if they're going for workforce training, if they're trying to make their life better, to really earn their way out of it, even in the interim, because there might be complete forgiveness in a year or two or a few more years. But if we don't have something right now as a way to address this, we're still sentencing people to a really difficult situation. So that's an example of some of the barriers, though, that we've been trying to remove. We've also been trying to build skills training. We've also been trying to create programs specifically geared towards youth and making sure that they have connection back to the workforce if they've been displaced, or even making sure that they aren't dropping out of school. So trying to prevent that situation from where they would be unemployed in the first place.
Talk a little bit about the youth initiatives.
Okay.
I think Grow Detroit's Young Talent is probably one that we know the best,
Yeah.
but it's not the only thing that's going on.
That's right. And I'm not sure, forgive me, I didn't listen to the total of your show before I came on, but maybe I can give you a little background on GDYT,
Yep.
Grow Detroit's Young Talent. So this is a program that really started in earnest in 2014 when the Skillman Foundation, with the Kellogg Foundation, along with City Connect, came together and said, we've really got to build some capacity here. We've got to do something to address, the huge number of youth who are outside the workforce, who really don't have access to that first job. One of the things in Detroit that we saw from a J.P. Morgan Chase Corporation for Skilled Workforce report was that the on-ramps, the entry-level jobs, were really missing from the city of Detroit. You have a lot of positions, certainly that are requiring middle skills or, a bachelor's degrees and such, but not as many that are for folks who are either completing their high school diploma or just have their high school diploma. So the Summer Youth Employment Initiative, Grow Detroit's Young Talent, was meant to help bridge that gap. It was also meant to help kids find a way to get off the streets and do something productive with their time in the summer, particularly if you could connect them to jobs and experiences that link back into what they were learning in the schools and what they might want to pursue as a career pathway moving forward. So, in 2014, you had about 2,500 kids go through that program, and that was a huge jump from the year previous. And then, Mayor Duggan, of course, came into office in 2014. You generally open enrollment in February for this program, and he was sworn in January. So his mission in 2014 was to make that program as successful as possible in that year. And then the next year, he said, that's not enough. We've got to double it. So we went to 5,600 people the following year, and that was a huge leap. And City Connect and Kellogg and Skillman and a whole bunch of foundations and corporate partners really helped us get there. And then, of course, Mayor Duggan, not being satisfied with success,
8,000.
Said, okay, we had 8,000 apply, so we're going to put 8,000 more. We're going to make sure that next year in 2016, we're going to have 8,000 positions and 8,000 opportunities for young people. And we were able to get over 8,000, 8,100 around. So really phenomenally successful program. Detroit Employment Solutions Corporation took over the program as the lead agency coordinating all the activities in 2016. And then this last year in 2017, we once again duplicated the 8,100. And we think that's a good level. That's about where other cities, our peer cities like Boston that have the same population or roughly the same population as Detroit does. They have about a program that does 8,000 youth opportunities in the summer. But the focus here is really how do we enhance that program, right? Because this is a costly program, of course. It's almost $10 million, and we have to raise that from various entities. About a third come from foundations, about a third from government, but quite a bit more comes from the corporate community in terms of both the funding for summer wages, but also those jobs, right? Because it's really critical to have the employer at the table that's going to give you a job. So it's in the next year, what you want to see and what we want to see is a expansion of those jobs in the corporate sector, in the private sector. Because many of the jobs, and what you have is kind of a tiered system. So your first year, if you're getting an experience, let's say you're 14, because this program runs from 14 to 24, you might be going out and cleaning a park. You might be going out and helping a nonprofit organization like Gleaners. You might be going out and helping your church. And we're going to make sure that you get that first entry point in, and really you're building those soft skills, right, of how to get a job, how to keep a job, how what potentially is your pathway forward, because you're starting to see some of what adults do outside of maybe your own family connections or school connections. And then what you say is, okay, once you get through that experience, we're going to get you into maybe a second tier experience. So if you've had a good experience that first year, maybe your second year, what you do is you come in and you work with the police cadets, or you work with a local business, small business. But in that third tier, this is where we're trying to build out more opportunities. It's really like an internship-like experience, right? I bet a lot of people, myself, I've had a lot of internships, getting to the place that I am in life. And those were really on-the-job experiences where, you were considered somewhat of an employee. You were learning a bit too, right? But you were doing a lot of the work that your colleagues in that office were doing too. So that's where, and if there's a hero with GDYT, it's DTE Energy from the corporate sector. Jerry Anderson and Dave Meter have really focused on making sure that we expand within the corporate sector of Detroit a huge amount of private sector jobs that are actually going to be leading to career pathways. Yep. And so you can get that experience in DTE Energy, and maybe you can see that you want to be a lineman, that makes over $100,000 a year. Maybe you can see that you want to be a construction manager, right?
Is my son Nick listening? Jeff, I'm going to stop you there. We're going to come back to GDYT and some of the other youth initiatives. I have to turn to Mr. Mohammed, who has been patiently, I can't even think that patient is the word for how long you've been waiting, Mr. Mohammed, to talk to us on the Journey to Job show here on 910 AM Superstation. Welcome.
Yes, you got me right at the right time. I want to thank you and congratulate you on the debut of your program.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I sure can. Thank you for that, and I think I have a pretty good roster for this inaugural show.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I work for State Representative Betty Cook Scott. And positively, ironically, we're on that committee for the workforce development. And we are working right now in Lansing for the people under Representative Betty Cook Scott. We're on that committee, and I would like the phone numbers of a few people before I finish. Representative Betty Cook Scott is the author. She's a sponsor of the driver responsibility bill. She is the one that actually helped to remove the driver responsibility bill and fee that was an impediment to jobs in Detroit and elsewhere throughout Michigan. So I like the number of the workforce development who's over it for Mayor Duggan. But more importantly, for the young people that are sitting there, we in Lansing and in Detroit, we need youth who are prepared. As the old saying goes, it's better be prepared for an opportunity and an opportunity not come than for an opportunity to come and you're not prepared to take care of business.
Absolutely.
So we
well
want
said.
to be prepared to take care of business with skill training that we're working on now, and we're key members of that committee that the representative from the mayor's office just spoke about. So I'd like to work with him because we're talking about those key bills in the House on our side, on the Senate side, so more younger people can be prepared for jobs. As a matter of fact, the other week we had a big meeting on this very thing downtown. And he said in about 10 years, most of the skilled trades, plumbing, mechanical, etc., they're going to be a big opening for younger people because the older people who are the electricians and the plumbers now, they will be retired.
That's exactly
so
right.
I would like the phone number and work with him on that from Lansing, even though I'm born and raised here in Detroit. And but that's the most important thing, as our late Mayor Coleman Young used to say, the best prevention for crime is a good job, but you have to be prepared for the jobs at hand.
Absolutely right. Mr. Mohammed, I'm going to turn. I'm going to turn to Jeff Donofrio for how would Mr. Muhammad contact you or somebody that can help him in the mayor's office.
Like I said, I'm going to slip my my phone number to your producer and make sure that maybe Mr. Muhammad can get that number right from her after we are done talking. But certainly, there are a couple ways anybody can get involved with programs like Summer Youth Employment, Grow Detroit's Young Talent. You can go to Detroit, Grow Detroit's Young Talent, GDYT.org, and find out more information on that. I'll tell you this, having representatives like Betty Cook Scott in Lansing really advocating for things like driver's responsibility, fee forgiveness, and advocating for alternative ways to pay that off are really important. And so thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad, for making sure that for your boss's work, for your work, to really remove that barrier from Detroiters who desperately need and want to go to work, and that things like this are holding them back.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad, and our wonderful producer, Pageant, and her team will help you connect to Jeff Donofrio on offline. We're running tight right now. I will ask Stacy to hang on. We'll come to you after our break. And this is 910 AM Superstation. Margaret Trimer-Hartley. It's the Journey to Jobs show.
Everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking. Time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There is so much hatred, war and poverty.
If the conversation is hot and the lines are jammed, give us a try at 313-778-7600 or 313-778-7601. That's 313-778-7600 or 313-778-7601.
910 Superstation is off the chisane.
910 AM Superstation is the voice of Detroit, and we want to hear what you have to say by any means necessary. 910 AM Superstation, the best, the brightest, and the bravest voices of Detroit. Don't believe me? Just listen.
Like every time I even consider dating someone, that god awful, I can't trust anybody, feeling is there. How do you ever overcome trust?
You can absolutely overcome trust when you really deal with the issues that caused you to be there. That's why I say to you all the time, I am so proud of you and all the things that you're doing, but you need to sit and be counseled. Period. Because there's some things that you need to heal from. There's some things that you need to really dive into. There's some places that need some addressing. And you're not going to do them on your own.
910 AM Superstation, giving you exactly what you need. 910 AM Superstation. We're bigger and better than ever and growing daily.
I'm Dr. Taylor. This is my inaugural show. Just a few things about me. I'm happy to be here to be part of the Superstation team. This program, we want to talk about addiction, which is a really broad subject. It covers a whole lot of things. I ask you to call in if you want to talk to me on the air about anything. We have online Sandra.
You have been my mentor for years. I look up to you, and I talk about you all the time to people. I think that what you've done proved to other people that they can do whatever they want to do with their life. And that's helped me get back up to it, because I was an alcoholic at one time. And I've been sober for 12 years on September 15th.
910 AM is the gold standard for talk radio. 910 AM Superstation is in a league of its own. We are the only talk radio station in the Metro Detroit area sensitive to the African American community.
Make sure you join us on what station?
910 AM the Superstation.
910 AM.
910 AM.
On 910 AM Superstation.
910 AM Superstation, Metro Detroit's only African American based talk radio station.
Wake up every everybody, no more sleeping in bed.
Good afternoon. It's no longer morning here on 910 AM Superstation. I'm Margaret Trimer-Hartley. This is Journey to Jobs, a conversation about all things related to opportunity and plugging in people who need opportunity. This is workforce development, entrepreneurship, and career awareness conversations. I'm going to remind you our call-in number is 313-209-9000. And before we go back to Jeff Donofrio to finish up some dialogue about Grow Detroit's Young Talent and other workforce initiatives out of the mayor's office, we're going to turn to Stacy, who, again, like so many of our callers this morning, has been patiently waiting for her turn. Good afternoon, Stacy.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for taking my call. I've got a couple questions. For the youth that are 18 and older that can come possibly into this program that do not have any access to computers or anything like that, how would you reach out to them in certain districts? Would there be flyers on the door to let them know that these programs are available to them? Will there be something posted to them? Because I know that the unemployment rate, as they give you to us as a percentage, is not really the true form, because once your unemployment runs out, you're no longer in the system. So how are you going to reach after these kids that are 18 to 24 that do not have a job, that do not have computers or access to any of this information? Will there be flyers to the district, or not even in a block club situation? Because these kids are out here doing no good.
Yep.
They don't have the opportunity to see this because of the fact that quick money is easy money when you walk down the street and do things.
Yep. So that's question number one. You said you had two questions?
Yes, the second question, the responsibility driver fee, wasn't that Granholm that put into it when our economy was strong?
Okay. I think both of these questions are in Jeff's bailiwick.
Sure. So I can tell you, driver responsibility fees, when they were enacted, I was getting my first job out of college, myself in Washington, D.C. So I can't tell you exactly from a perspective of what the occurrence was. It was under Governor Granholm. It was a Republican legislature at the time, and I think the economy was perhaps taking a downturn in terms of what they were looking to fill a revenue gap with. But I don't want to talk necessarily about how this got to be a problem. I want to talk about how it's going to be. We're going to get to a solution right now. And that's why this legislation in Lansing is so important and so critical. Sometimes it's not understood fully, especially in the time of turbulence, what the repercussions of some of the legislative changes are going to be. And it's truly been very hurtful for folks in Detroit and across the state of Michigan, especially those who are struggling. So that's really question one. Question two, though, I want to talk to specifically. With the Summer Youth Employment Program with GDYT, of course, those folks who don't have access to a computer, who may not go into a local library or have access maybe at their school, what we're doing is a couple of things. Already we run a huge amount of recruitment events at churches throughout the community. We run recruitment events at community centers. We make sure that we're reaching out to other groups that are connected directly to individual youth throughout the community. So giving as many possible ways into this program for Detroit's youth, especially those 18 and older. And when you talk about where else we're serving individuals like that, we have three one-stop Michigan Works Career Centers that Detroit Employment Solutions Corporation runs that are in the community, one over on Connor at the Samaritan Center, one at the Northwest Activity Center, and one on Michigan Avenue at Sir Metro. Also, we have a Youth Career Center, which is a youth re-engagement center that's specifically focused on individuals who are between the ages of really 16 and 24, 16 and 26, really, what we would call opportunity youth. Those are individuals who are outside the workforce, so they haven't been employed. They're also not in school, and they need some sort of barrier removal, whether that's some sort of skills training, whether it's some sort of housing, transportation support. So we're definitely trying to target them. And then we're going one step further, and I was telling Margaret this over the break. This fall in 5 different schools, we're taking a model that works really well in Boston, which is Boston, they have career counselors, summer youth career counselors in the high schools themselves. And so what they do is they work with individuals throughout the year to prepare them for that job during the summer, and then link it back to curriculum that they're learning in school. They also link it to co-ops during the summer and other employment situations that they could potentially find opportunities for during the school year. But the key here, what we're trying to replicate is now Boston has 19. We're going to start out this year with 5. We're targeting 5 schools around the city. We're not ready to announce those schools yet, but in November, there'll be 5 GDYT career specialists whose sole job is really to help individuals from those schools connect with these, particularly these enhanced opportunities, these internship-like opportunities with corporations. And then on the opposite side, we're building out a better employer engagement team to make sure that we have as many employers at the table helping us provide those opportunities for Detroiters.
That is so...
Can I ask you something really quick?
Sure.
Are you reaching out to the women and gentlemen that are in the homeless shelters to say, hey, we can get you a job, we can do this for you, come on and visit us?
So we absolutely have outreach to homeless shelters. We have outreach to a lot of community-based organizations who are partners. There are 400 organizations that would self-identify as being in the workforce space in some way in the city of Detroit. And so we provide opportunities for all of those individuals to help us connect, to help us, find ways to bring Detroiters into the workforce development system and get connected to a job. Because at the end of the day, it's not just a service, it's not just a training, it's a job that we want to help provide.
Thank you, Stacy, for calling in for your questions. Thank you. Those are great answers, Jeff. One of the things that is, I think, surprising to all of us is how hard it is to get the word out in an era in which there are so many different communication vehicles. It's still tough.
Yeah.
Sounds like it might be a good job for human flyers, door to door. I mean, really, you can't diminish the impact of face-to-face, door-to-door human connection when it comes to dragging folks from their pockets into the mainstream and into the work and the opportunities that are available.
And you have the Department of Neighborhoods in the city of Detroit and the mayor's office who are doing that every day. And what we do is we supply them with flyers when we have a training program. We talk about where they can come in their local neighborhood to potentially get services. So absolutely, you're right. And some of that too is right. There's so many different places. You have to cut through the noise. How do you figure out what's the right way? Which is one of the reasons we launched DetroitAtWork.com, right, for adults in particular. What we heard continuously is, okay, tell me which program to go into. I hear about 5 different commercial driver's license programs. I hear about 7 different programs, for maybe asbestos remediation. What's the one that's going to get me a job? And so we launched this website last year. The mayor announced it as a State of the City address, DetroitAtWork.com. And so individuals can go on that site. They can look at some of the industries that are really in high demand where there's growing jobs. And then they can start their journey by signing up there. Now, they don't have to go online, especially if you don't have access to a computer. But what we're trying to say is that if you come into us, we're going to make sure that anybody we send you to, whatever training we send you to, whatever support service we send you to, there's a job at the end of it. So you're going to have the best possible chance to find employment through our services.
Yep. I know the challenge a lot of young people experience today, too, especially when they apply for jobs online or they go and put their name. It feels like it's just a dark hole, and they hear nothing, they don't feel, and in many cases, they don't stand out among thousands of people who are submitting applications. How do you get recognized? How do you stand out? How do you get a response? In fact, in one of my forthcoming shows, we're going to have some experts come in and talk to us about just how do you get that attention when you're in the midst of thousands of others in an impersonal online environment.
Well, and I'll bet this, too. One of the reasons GDYT is so powerful, and Margaret, you probably had this experience. I bet, Vaughn, you've had this experience, and Adonis has clearly had that experience, is who you know. The network that you've built out through the years, whether it's in your first job experience and the internships that you've worked on. I mean, my pathway really did start here by doing an internship with John Dingell in Washington, D.C., where I was 20 years old. I went there, did an internship in Washington, D.C. with him. And then they kept offering me jobs. And so I got to run his office. I got to run his campaigns and do some pretty cool work like building wildlife refuges and helping economic development within, downriver, out Wayne County and, Washoe, Monroe. And this led me to the point where I could come back and, hopefully do a good job here for the city of Detroit and Detroiters.
But it also speaks to one of those soft skills, understanding a network, knowing what to do with a network, how to expand and exploit the power of that network. And that's one of the things we try really hard within the work of JA, and we tried really hard within the GDYT experience we had this summer, was to give kids exposure to a lot of great names in our community. People that if they tracked them down, followed up, used those business cards, they would get to the next level, the next step. And that's what we saw with our 15 kids who spent the summer learning everything entrepreneurial. When they left and they took those business cards with them, they were landing jobs and internships and next level experiences. So it was pretty powerful. Jeff, I want you to talk a little bit about another set of initiatives. And I know, again, sort of looking at the heroes at DTE, the work at Randolph Technical High School really came to be because of the energy at DTE, and the Workforce Development Board, I know, had a lot to do with launching a terrific initiative there. Can you tell us about that and then maybe foreshadow what's to come?
Sure. So, we're very fortunate at the Workforce Board to have two co-chairs who are just phenomenal members of the community and hugely committed. Dave Meter, who's the vice chair at DTE Energy, and Cindy Paskey, who's the CEO and founder of S3. Their leadership is really what has brought us to this place. And really, of course, the leadership of Mayor Duggan, which we would be nowhere without. What I'll say is DTE Energy for the last couple of years has really been holding the torch for career technical education in the city of Detroit. Through emergency manager after emergency manager. What we were talking about in the city of Detroit when it came to the K through 12 system was really finances. We weren't talking about education or academics or career pathways in the way that we should have. And you see now that Dr. Beatty and the school board are in place, that conversation has shifted, right? And now you see increased enrollment, you see increased, connection to jobs that's being built into these schools. And career technical education is absolutely, I think, the clearest connection to a job that you can have. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, maybe your listeners, the city of Detroit and the public school system had 3 standalone career technical education centers that were built really in the early 80s. Randolph, Bright Hop, and Go Lightly. And Bright Hop and Go Lightly were made as kind of mirrors of each other on the east and west side of Detroit. And so you had programs there like culinary arts, you have cosmetology, you have automotive repair, you had welding and other really in-demand programs that when they first started out. Randolph was specifically built for a construction skilled trades pathway to help people in plumbing, in pipe fitting, in carpentry, in masonry, in horticulture, in electrical. And at its height, you really had 700 students going through that program a year in the high school program. And then you had adult trainings in the evenings as well. So it's amazing. When I first came in to Detroit to do this job specifically, you'd have a lot of people just say, fix Randolph and we're going to have everything's going to be better, right? Just fix Randolph. Because really this time last year, you had 80 kids enrolled at Randolph, in a high school that has really a capacity for 700, and these are half-day programs, right? So you go half-day in the morning or half-day in the afternoon. You have a home high school somewhere in the city of Detroit where you are taking most of your classes or the remainder of your classes, but you're getting that really specific hands-on training, that contextualized training, right? Because what's important about career technical education is that let's say you have a student who hates math, but they love doing work in an electrical program, which is basically all math. It's just they're doing it in a hands-on way, and they're seeing how it can be applied. So what we did about a year ago is we negotiated an agreement with Detroit Public Schools and Detroit Employment Solutions Corporation, which is headed by the phenomenal Nicole Sherrod-Freeman, who you have to have on your show. But we signed a 10-year agreement with them that said, we are going to invest in career technical education with you. We're going to help build a better school, upgrade your facilities, buy new equipment, give you connections to employers and unions, and make sure that the curriculum is meeting exactly what they want on the job site. And then we're going to support the teachers and instructors too. We'll help maybe bring in some teachers and pay for them, subsidize teachers that you can't get for because of the pay disparity between what the market will pay and what the school district can pay. And then if we do all that, we get you the right materials and we set up this program for success. What we'd like to do is have the facility in the evenings and weekends using that same equipment and those same facilities to help train adults. And so what we set out as a goal is let's get from an 80 person enrollment in the high school program to 300 this fall. and let's get 300 adults trained at the same time in year 1. And then we're going to expand the capacity, in year 2 and 3. But I'm happy to report that as of October 1st, October 4th, really for Count Day, we had 308 students that had registered for classes. So we met and exceeded our goal there. We brought the electrical program, which had been shuttered for the last 3 years because you couldn't pay market rate for a teacher. We brought it back. We actually hired an instructor from the IBEW apprenticeship program to come in and teach that program for the high school students. And then we're starting our adult programs at the end of this month. So we already have 20 people who enrolled in a basic skills construction class. We'll have a pre-apprenticeship class that's starting next month. And then in January, we'll have a whole bunch of certification classes that Detroiters can gain access to. And to sign up for that, really, you want to go to DetroitAtWork.com.
Awesome. Well, the 2-gen concept really is so powerful in this community, so necessary in this community. I know when we offer programs for kids at Finance Park downtown and they're learning how to manage their money, the kids are telling us, my mom or dad could use this.
Sure.
And I was talking to one of our investors from Suburban Collection. He said, maybe we ought to have a senior achievement as well as a junior achievement in this town, right? To complement the skills that we all, frankly, I could go back to school and learn a few of those things myself again.
Well, we have to be lifelong learners, right? And so maybe, you asked about what's the future, right, of where are we going from here? So we've been successful this first year, and it's really just starting in terms of the academics this first year at Randolph. So we want to make sure that that's executed well. We're going to have a Randolph Phase 2, right? We're going to add in some additional programs like welding. We're going to add in robotics. We're going to add in horticulture. We're going to add in, maybe a few others as we see what the demand is, the community for jobs. And then really what we have to look at is, okay, what's next in terms of CTE with DPS? And we're in that conversation right now. Bright Hop and Go Lightly, we've toured around. We've looked at that. We're auditing the programs to see what are they doing well, which is quite a bit. They have good enrollment right now, but there's still capacity to increase. And then what's really has been missing from so many of the programs in Detroit, whether it's the K through 12 system or others, is really that employer connection, right? So that it does lead to a job that exists, not just a job in concept. And so we have organizations like Quicken Loans. We have the Detroit Restaurant Association. You've got a whole host of chefs that have come into the city who are looking to say that culinary arts program at Breithoff and Go Lightly, we want to do something there. We want to help bring some greater connections into our businesses, and then also make sure that they're marketable and can keep producing the cutting edge talent that we need to grow. Automotive repair, you're looking at things like all the dealerships around the state that are going to need really well-qualified individuals coming out because these vehicles are getting very sophisticated, right?
Well, and they need investment.
That's right.
Of current technology in those centers. You can't be learning on 1980s technology and expect to fix a car that's produced today.
Well, and what you see is the last new vehicle that they've gotten in there to work on is from 2004.
Yeah. Lots changed.
A lot has changed. So you need to make sure that the computers, because there's a host of computers in a vehicle these days, that you know how to service each of those and you know what signals that they're giving into a mechanic who can see how to repair that or what might be going wrong.
Yep. I'm thrilled to note that on November 5th, on that Sunday's show, we have the principal, Krista McKinney from Randolph, and she's bringing one of her female students to talk about the work and the excitement of what's going on there. And both of those individuals are participating in the Junior Achievement Saxy Construction Expo.
Excellent.
November 9th. So we're bringing 30-plus vendors to talk about careers in construction, and they also talk about careers in entrepreneurship because every one of those skilled trades businesses was started by somebody.
That's right.
And those folks will be in the room as well. I hope you noticed that my water bottle is a Grow Detroit's Young Talent water bottle sponsored by Quicken Loans. So, we're all in. We're all supportive of the work that's going on in the city. I want to touch on one other point that I think is really powerful and that maybe we don't understand well enough, and that is the engagement of returning citizens. We have a returned citizen here who's made good, and we understand that it's really in our interest to employ and engage folks as they come out of the correction system if we want to build a community and if we don't want to see recidivism and all of that. Can you talk a little bit about tangibly what's happening and how folks who maybe have loved ones or are themselves on the verge of returning? Talk about the opportunities.
Well, so the city of Detroit has about 3,000 individuals come back into the city, return to the city from the Michigan Department of Corrections every year. And, that's a significant amount of individuals who, unfortunately, in the past, it's been almost a 75% unemployment rate. And so how we expect individuals to return into the city and find a way to become productive members of society again without a job is really difficult. So we received a few $1 million from the U.S. Department of Labor about 2 years ago to start this training in prison, to bring our one-stop, our career services into these facilities to help start the process of training and connection to a job before folks re-entered. So we've worked with about 900 individuals through this program over the last 2 years. We've been able to give specific vocational training to about 300 individuals. That's things like culinary arts, that's things like lead asbestos remediation and high-low training. And it's been really powerful. I go to the culinary arts graduation every couple of months, and you talk to, because it's a men's prison, you talk to these guys about the experiences they've had. Some of them have been in prison for 40 years. Some of them have been in, 90 days because they've violated their parole and had to come back in. But they all worry about what's going to happen when they get back, how they're going to reconnect with their families, how they're going to make a living. And so these programs that we're providing them, it's a direct placement into a job. If they're ready to go, if they want to, continue their training once they leave, we'll give them the right resources and supports to make sure that happens too. But so the prison training that we're doing, the prison training that Michigan Department of Corrections is doing, they have vocational villages that they've set up across the state. We've got to continue to enhance that. We've got to continue to build out these training programs and provide more pathways into jobs. But we also need to work on the employer side, because so many employers don't understand the value of what a returning citizen can bring to their workforce and to their company. When you look at some who do, DTE Energy is another one of those. You have SOCD, which has hired a huge amount of returning citizens coming through Detroit Employment Solutions Corporation to go into their workforce in manufacturing. The Detroit Manufacturing Systems, DMS, with Andra Rush, she has been a leader in this. And she'll tell you, she's told me multiple times, some of the folks that I hire directly out of prison are my best employees because they work the hardest. They have the best work ethic, and they know that they don't have as many opportunities out there as another employee might have. So they're going to stick with it. So it's a real value proposition that we have to sell to the employer. And we also have to make sure that the employer isn't artificially putting in an HR process which is just going to wash a person out because they have a criminal record.
It's so true, but again, we come back to the culture, right? And we have a culture of fear and a culture that has said background checks, and if you've got a red mark on your background, you aren't not coming to work here. And so we do have to maybe relax and understand that some offenses are worse than others. And as one who ran schools, I couldn't hire somebody who had an offense involving a child. But I will tell you, I waived the restriction and hired some folks with felonies in their background, and I never regretted it. They were indeed some of my best teachers, and they've gone on to be school leaders who, without them, that connection to families and kids that are maybe not living in the mainstream would never be as strong.
Yeah, we all hit bumps in the road in life. We all make mistakes. That shouldn't lead to a lifetime of
You
punishment.
made mistakes along the way?
I've made a lot of mistakes.
Next time, we'll bring you on the show to talk about that.
I'd love to hear those.
This has been, to me, a really exciting discussion, and I'm really glad we had a young person in the room with us to keep the focus on what it's all about. We need to engage our communities in order to create a better future. Thank you for joining me on this first show on 910 AM Superstation. I'm going to forecast a little bit of what's coming next week. Next Sunday, we are going to take an international approach to the Journey to Jobs conversation. And I'm bringing a group of elementary students and their teacher from a little school in Southwest Detroit that I helped to found with a tremendous Salvadoran woman. The kids from Escuela Avancemos are running a coffee shop called Ground Up, and they're saving money to buy an abandoned lot and turn it into something productive. I'll also have an entrepreneur from Belarus who visited Detroit through an organization called Global Ties, and my intern at Junior Achievement from Paraguay, who's here to learn more about entrepreneurship and financial literacy. I'll also have a teacher from a charter school who takes dozens of Detroit kids overseas every year to give them a view of the global economy and the global marketplace. And finally, I'm excited to announce that beginning on November 5th, Dr. Nikolai Viti will join us once a month for a half hour to do a deep dive discussion of what's going on in our city schools. So please tune in, call in, engage with me on the journey to jobs. This is Margaret Trimer-Hartley, 910 AM Superstation. Thank you.